What was the worst job interview you've had? At an interview for a tech startup. They asked me if you could be any animal. What would you be? I answered otter because fun, active, work well with their hands and cute as. They really debated whether or not to hire me because of that answer because, and I quote, "We only hire predators, never prey." They weren't sure how to quantify an otter, because none of them had ever paid the least bit of attention to any sort of animal documentary or read biology or visited a zoo recently. God, that job sucked hard. Was invited for an IT helper position when I was 17. Would help fix computers for people at a shoddy PC fix shop. They asked me what's the first thing you check if a customer calls and says their screen doesn't turn on? I said, well, you gotta check if they have it plugged into a socket. They laughed and said thank you, that will be it. Then led me to the door and gently pushed me out. But that's the right answer. I drove 2 hours for the interview. Got there and the interviewer was off sick and hadn't told anyone about me coming in. Got back in my car and drove the 2 hours home. Withdrew my name from consideration. The interviewer insisted on knowing why I'd left graduate school. Now, I had left graduate school because my advisor died in a car accident and the whole small department was thrown for a loop and no one seemed to know or care what was going to happen to me or my just started research project. The arsehole interviewer wouldn't even accept my advisor died suddenly and dug into the gory details until I was almost in tears, even intimating that I must have had feelings for my advisor. Close bracket. I couldn't wait to get out of there and in my haste to leave I knocked some solutions off a cart, which had no business being in his office BTW, on my way out. I'd never been so humiliated in my life. After that, I was sure I'd never get a job in science. My first interview ever was at DQ and I accidentally knocked a 90-year-old woman over. So after accidentally slaying your predecessor, how's life been as the new Dairy Queen? 5 interview rounds with the last interview round being with the CEO, all for an entry-level customer service job. During the last interview, the CEO said you weren't allowed to get sick. And you weren't allowed to leave at the end of the day until all of the work had been done. So even though the job was 8-4, the CEO said customer service reps often stayed until 6 PM or later. She also asked if I would be comfortable secretly reporting to her about what the customer service team is up to. I declined the job offer and the company harassed me with emails asking why and what they did wrong. Really glad I didn't take the job. Job was for a vibration analysis engineer. I knew how to do the job well. I knew the pay should be around 95k. And they stated 55k in the interview. When I tried to discuss my point, they said, "Don't worry. There's plenty of overtime." They also mentioned since they weren't involved with many balancings at the moment, I would assist the cleaning crew with a lot of the cleanings. I've never been so uninterested in a job in my life. Vibrations and lysis. Cleaning crew. That's a complicated way to say SX toy tester. Not that bad. But I remember Taco Bell asked me what type animal I would be if I could be anything. Like WTF do you want me to say? I would be a fire ant so I could work efficiently with my closest friends. 16-year-old me said an eagle. Because they're strong and they can fly. I drove an hour to be interviewed for a computer repair tech job at a rental company. And 3/4 of the way through the interview they told me I was perfect for the position. However, they recently removed the position altogether. They then asked if I'd be willing to repair furniture instead until the position opened again. An agency sent me for an interview and said the starting salary is you.I 33,000. The interview went fairly well until the interviewer said, "So what sort of salary are you looking for?" So using the info I had from the agency I said, "Well, I think you.I 33,000 is a fair starting point." The interviewer practically threw me out. He started to shout about wasting his time because I expected to be paid a huge salary, and who did I think I was? He was paying you.I 20,000. Yo, I have one that sticks out. I applied to a government branch as a network admin. The newspaper ad asked for a bachelor's degree. They called me into the interview. When I got there, the first thing the interviewer said was, "We wanted someone with a master's degree. Why did you apply?" Now, I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they had other interviews that day and got them mixed up. Happens. I just informed the interviewer that the ad I applied for requested a bachelor's degree and confirmed the position I was interviewing for. No. We definitely wanted someone with a master's degree. So, again, why did you apply? If you wanted someone with a master's degree, why did you bother calling me in for an interview? You're very rude and unprofessional. Yeah. You end up at every junction thus far. But I'm the one who's rude and unprofessional. In a group interview, the interviewer crossed a line through my name on the list he had after I told him what I graduated in. This was within the first 5 minutes of a 40-minute meeting. When he said, "I'll give you extra hours if you bring me smokes every day." Then put his hand on my leg and said his wife gives him passes to have fun. I also got a speeding ticket on the way to the interview. Was not my month. An interviewer told me that he worried I would be sexually harassed if I joined his team. Red flag. At least he was honest and you dodged a bullet. The first question they asked was a statistics exam type question. Took me completely off guard. I half-assed the answer. A complete answer would have taken half an hour. The next question was about a Punnett square analysis. I answered honestly and said that the first thing I would do would be to look it up. Errors in Punnett squares are incredibly common, and I wouldn't trust anyone who said they could do it off the top of their head. I'd look it up even if I'd done one last week. They really didn't like that answer. They wanted to know where my husband worked and where we lived. And they concluded that our 6-month rental location was completely incompatible with the commute to their location. The whole thing was just super weird. It was like they sat down determined to find a reason they should not hire me. I was relieved to get out of there. Edit. Brain fart. My apologies. Latin square. Not Punnett square. Too much time spent quizzing my kid before his bio test. I interviewed for a project management position. The interviewer describes the job. Basically it was pure research and data entry of potential clients. Then cold calling them and documenting the results. The job ad mentioned exactly none of this but was an average project management job ad. Else I wouldn't have applied in the first place. I asked what exactly was the project management part. And got told that could, not would, be down the road. Maybe 2-5 years in. But really only maybe. I thanked them for the interview opportunity. We wrapped things up and I politely left. Showed up looking good in my suit with a ton of knowledge on Capital Partners. It turned out I had researched the wrong company named Capital Partners. Could have been worse, dude. At least you didn't get the wrong Four Seasons. I went in to apply for an administrative assistant position and the guy kept asking me questions about liking kids and are my passports up to date, etc. I was so confused. Turns out what he really wanted was a nanny for his 2 young kids to travel with him and his wife back to India. I was so ed he wasted my time. I noped right the out of there. If that's what he wanted, that's what he should have put in the job description. I'm sure he would have gotten plenty of qualified individuals to apply. Had a phone interview and the woman kept asking more and more intrusive questions. Kept hinting I'm a total piece of who's totally unfit for the job. It was the easiest job description ever, and jumping to conclusions about my life that were completely untrue. For example, I found out that being a freelancer who gets a lot of decently paid work each month is apparently living off my parents. She kept going on and on like that for quite a while before I told her to off and hung up. Didn't really need that job too badly, but it was in a different country, so the travel aspect was the main reason. Years later I found out it was a stress interview, which apparently is a thing. Those people. Companies that do that are not worth working for. Edit. Such a simple comment. But never had that many upvotes. Thanks everyone. As the interviewer. Candidate responded to a question I asked with, "Is that really how you want to spend our time together?" By asking me that question, when I wrote up my notes I included that bit. It obviously came up in the debrief and a huge red flag. Other interviewers also had similar, though not as serious, feedback on the candidate. He was not hired. Semicolon. As the interviewee. Interviewer immediately launched into, with a rough accusatory tone, "You're a job hopper. Why are you a job hopper?" When I was being recruited for a role a few years ago, I'd been working successfully as an independent consultant for 7 or 8 years, which he equated with job hopping. I ended that interview pretty quickly with "I don't think this is going to be a good fit," and gave the recruiter some pointed feedback. He seemed to acknowledge that she was difficult. I had an interview with the MC back in the day. I don't remember the specifics other than I was really nervous. I had a "We are sorry to inform you" email waiting for me before I finished the 10-minute trip home. I was the only person that HR was able to source for a role and I still got rejected. It's like that time that place was interviewing for a programmer position and required 10 years experience for a language that was only 8 years old. The inventor of the language applied and was rejected. At an interview to be a county street sweeper, guy asks me if I have a girlfriend. Proceeds to rant for 5 minutes how young people don't get married anymore. Then he asks me what I want to avoid at the job. At the time I had no idea how to answer as I'd never been asked that in an interview before. So I ask him to clarify. To which he just repeats the question over and over until he gets super angry that I don't know how to answer that. Then asks me to leave. To this day. Biggest WTF interview I've had. Background. My face tends to get really red when I'm stressed embarrassed. In a previous job, my company hired a consultant to help some of us improve our presentation skills. Consultant gave me some good advice. One of the weirder pieces of advice, however, was that if my face got red, I should flex my calf muscles because the flexing would divert blood away from my face into my legs. I had no idea if that was true or not, but it was weird enough that I remembered it. Job interview. About 10 years later, I'm giving a presentation at a job interview. I'm a scientist and giving a research presentation as part of a job interview is pretty common. My research was pretty good, but it had one critical flaw that I wanted to avoid discussing during my presentation. Somehow, everyone in the room locked in on the floor and directed a barrage of critical questions at me. I could feel my face starting to get red and all I could do was furiously flex my calf muscles. Which didn't do a damn thing. I didn't get the job. Interviewer. Putting candy bars on the table to open the interview. Have a candy bar. Do you want Hershey's or Snickers? E. Neither. Thanks. I. Go ahead. Pick one. M. I don't want any candy now. Thanks. I. Take one. Hershey's or Snickers? M. Okay. I'll take the Snickers. I. No. I want the Snickers. You take the Hershey's. M. No. Thank you. Maybe they were trying to pull off some dumbass power move stunt that they saw in some movie. I was interviewing for a job in Houston and lived in Austin, about 5 hours away. I drove to Houston for the first round of interviews, and they said it went well and wanted to bring me in for a final interview. So I drove there again. It seemed like it went well and they told me they had one more interview to conduct and would have a decision tomorrow. So the next day came and went. I emailed the manager to ask if any decision had been made. Nothing. Waited a couple more days. Left a voicemail. Nothing. Then a couple days later, I just called the main number for the company and told the receptionist why I was calling. She was like, well, someone just started in that job yesterday. They ghosted me after I drove a total of 10 hours to interview twice. Still salty about that 11 years later. I interviewed for what was my dream job, Something that I have a ton of experience in and 2 degrees, including one from literally the most prestigious school in my field. They liked me so much on my first few rounds of interviews that they asked me to fly across the country for the final one. So I go through easily the worst travel day of my life. Arrive for my interview. And the interviewer takes one look at my resume and says, "I don't know why you came all the way out here. You aren't qualified for this." Suffice to say, I will never work there. Had an interview. Went well. I was offering the job on the spot and accepted. The HR manager went to get the needed paperwork. Came back 10 minutes later and said I must have forgot that we already filled this position. "I'm sorry, but we don't have an opening. I could call you if something opens back up." I said no thank you. It was my best interview. Great rapport with the interviewer. Gave me the job on the spot. It for a transfer to QA at Johnson Control. Came into work the next day to have the offer rescinded. The job was already given to the plant manager's niece and it had only been posted because of company policy. The story is much longer and complicated afterward, but it was the first of several times I had been promoted, different companies, and then been told, "Never mind." Edit. Appreciate the replies and awards. Feel like I won Reddit today. Edit. Bro. Johnson Controls is really not well liked. Realized it was a pyramid scheme halfway through the interview. I was already working, so didn't accept the job. Did their job description begin with "Hey hun"? Video chat interview. Red flag number 1, the interview was with 10 interviewers. I was told it would be one-on-one. Red flag number 2. Towards the end they asked if I had any questions. When I asked, "Do you all enjoy working here?" they all looked at each other nervously for about 20 seconds until someone said, "Sure. I mean, as much as you can enjoy work, I guess." Nope. I told them I couldn't answer their questions. Farted audibly out of stress and thanked them for their time. Had an interview at an office supply store once. Guy told me straight up it was a high pressure sales quota job. Their prices on computers and peripherals were, and that's what I'd be selling. Dude straight up said it's a lot of work for low pay. Not a lot of people enjoy working there. And he finished off with the fact that he's been there for 18 years. Well, can't fault his honesty. If only more interviewers were like that. I had a Skype interview with a private practice and the lady interviewing me literally made it sound like a stern military parent. You can never be late. Mind you, the job was an hour away. Even if you have a cold you can never call in sick. IDK if this was meant for pre or post COVID. We're a small company so you won't have much of a work-life balance. PS our pay for all this dedication is only $3 more than the measly pay you're getting now. Just a whole interview of red flags. And the last one was when the lady messaged me immediately after saying I got the job and had to leave my job at maximum 5 days notice. Regardless of me kind of bombing the interview and claiming there were other interviewees in line. Started as the worst. And ended as the best. The beginning started like this. "I'm so sorry to have to inform you of this. But we pulled the wrong resume registered sign contact information. We didn't mean to call you in for an interview." Before leaving, the interviewer gave me a brief tour of the company grounds because they felt so bad for wasting my time. They introduced me to the department head that I would have been working for if that department was actually hiring. Had a great conversation and the department head was convinced that I would be an asset to them. And they hired me on the spot. Edit. Just wanted to add, since this got way more attention than I thought, that I have been with this company for over 8 years now. And they are an awesome bunch of people. It was a very lucky day for me. I applied for an internship at a human rights law office. They gave me questions on the spot to debate with them. Like should people accused of RP remain anonymous until convicted, and is bribery acceptable if it's for a good cause? It was me versus a panel of 5 senior human rights lawyers for a whole hour. Who just ripped me apart from start to finish. Everything I said, they made sound like the dumbest response with their rebuttals. By the end I was a nervous babbling wreck. Did not get the internship, but did appreciate the experience in retrospect. When they got back to me, they told me your CV resume was fantastic. So we were quite disappointed with how poor your interview was. As the interviewee, I told them I hated salespeople when they asked why I'd left my last job, which exposed two things about me. I hadn't looked up the company I was interviewing with and that their primary line of business was sales. The mood got chilly real fast after that. Did not get the job. As the interviewer, had a guy ask if it was okay if he went to the restroom real fast and then never came back. His recruiter, who had come with him, was super embarrassed by the whole thing. Honestly, he was a young kid who'd just graduated. And while he was getting some of the more in-depth technical questions wrong, he definitely was asking the right questions in return. So we probably would have brought him on entry level. I think he was experiencing a case of imposter syndrome since we were asking him things he didn't know, so he panicked. Hope he received some coaching on how to handle that. My personal favorite bad interview. I had been unemployed for a bit. Was desperate for a new gig. Had gained a lot of weight living off of fast food. So my good pants didn't fit me very well. I sat down in the interview chair as the person was walking around to their side of the desk. And the button of my pants popped off. Did a one-hopper off of the desk. And right into their coffee cup. Swished. No clink at all. For the entire interview, they were sipping their coffee. And I was sitting there with my pants unbuttoned waiting for the big reveal. I left before they got to the bottom of their coffee. But they had to have put 2 and 2 together. This narrowly beats out the time I was offered water from a carafe at an interview. Dropped it. And soaked both interviewers. At least that one wasn't as psychologically tense. Close bracket. Edit. No. I didn't get the job. Edit 2. Yes. I should have told them. But I froze up. And they were a very talkative interviewer. 2. 1. The recruiter started to fold my CV into a paper plane during the interview. Didn't get the job. 2. Was pawned off unsuspectingly to the CFO of a company 5 minutes into my interview with the CEO. The CFO had no idea what to ask, so he went the tell me your biggest flaws way. I was so dejected that I said you'll have to hire me to find out. Interview ended 5 minutes later. I spent 30 minutes crying at my hubris and stupidity in the parking lot. Got the job. It was my first professional law firm interview. I was so nervous. I had applied for a legal secretary position. The attorney whose name was on the door would be interviewing me, so I was a nervous wreck. When he walked in the room, I stood up, introduced myself and shook his hand. He looked me up and down and said, "Yeah, you'll do." I turned around and walked out without saying another word. I got invited to a group interview. I thought it meant that a group of people would interview me, which is fairly common. I showed up and there were about 10 other kids there. We all went into a conference room and they interviewed us all at once. They asked a question and everyone took turns answering. They switched up who went first each time. And one kid completely froze when it was his turn. So we all had to sit there in the most uncomfortable silence. She said employees got marked down 1 point if they came in late to work, even in a blizzard. She said it was their responsibility to check the weather the day before and prepare accordingly. Some of their employees commuted from 100 miles away, so they didn't cut anybody any slack. Usually I send a follow-up email saying thanks for the interview. I'm interested in the job. Blah blah blah. But I didn't send an email that time. The interview was at a well-known bank in the city for a software developer job. Walked into the interview room. Shook hands with the 2 guys when one of them said, "Nice to meet you, Jessica." My name is not Jessica. So I'm immediately confused. Apparently there was a mistake and they wanted to actually interview a Jessica and not me. We went along with the interview anyway. But they were clearly frustrated. It was one of my first real job interviews after school, so I was trying to stay positive anyway. But lost it shortly after we started. I gave them a synopsis of my background and how I got into programming by creating video games when I was a kid. Their response? We're a bank. We don't make video games here. I didn't even know how to respond. Like, did they think I was actually that stupid? Anyway, I wasn't expecting to ever hear back. But around 3 months later, got an email for the job offer. Obviously didn't take it. But I'll always be genuinely curious if that was meant for the real Jessica. Not horrible. I will just always remember it. Interviewer. Has a previous employer ever asked you to do anything illegal? Smug look on his face thinking I would be flustered. Me. Yes. They asked me to take a copyrighted image and tweak it so we wouldn't get caught. Interviewer. Whoa. What did you do? Me. I said no. And I'm now trying to determine if you are going to ask me to do something illegal in this prospective job. He spent the next 20 minutes apologizing and swearing he just thought it was a fun interview question.